Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. I am Patrick D. McCoy, the African-American voice in classical music. We have an exciting broadcast in store for you today. Our special guest is a person who is very dear to the hearts of her native D.C. family and fans around the world. From Galveston Street to concert halls and opera houses across the globe, she continues to garner unparalleled superlatives for her luminous voice and artistry. The person I speak of is none other than the internationally acclaimed opera superstar, Ms. Denyce Graves. Good morning, Ms. Graves.
Good morning. I'm here, Mr. McCoy. How are you?
I am well. Thank you so much. It is an honor to share this time with you this morning.
Well, I'm pleased to be here. I've been looking forward to this event for a while, so I'm pleased to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Tell me, so how does Denyce Graves start her day?
It usually starts at about 4:30 a.m. every day. My husband is a transplant surgeon, and he has to leave quite early to get to the hospital. So when he's up, that's my moment to go downstairs and get on the treadmill before having to wake up my daughter at about 6 o'clock to get her ready for school, because she has to be at school at 8 o'clock. And it takes a lot of time getting her up at 6 o'clock means that she actually starts to move at 6:35. And then, it's making breakfast and doing all of those things. And I enjoy doing that. And then once I get back from doing that, I usually have a rehearsal of some sort, as I prepare for the engagements that are in front of me. And then running errands, depending on what's going on in the calendar that day, because I have one of these calendars that no 2 days are the same. So every day something different is going on. And right now I really have my mind focused on this concert that I have coming up at the Kennedy Center on February 1st. So my attention is sort of turned in that direction, even though I leave town tomorrow and go to Florida for a few days, and then I'm back. My daughter has a piano recital, and then I'm off to Korea, and then I'm back 2 or 3 days before that concert. So my time is now to focus on the concert.
Wow, we're going to talk about that special concert a little bit later. But just as I have observed the triumphs of your career, I can't help but notice not only your musical presence, but also your stature in terms of your place historically in our nation's history. I want to take us back to Easter Sunday, April 12th of 2009, and what that day meant to you as you sang for the 70th anniversary of the historic concert that was performed by Marian Anderson on the Lincoln Memorial. Could you maybe explain to the listeners how you felt?
I'm not sure that one can actually put into words how I really felt. I'm going to say probably the words that you expect to hear, and that is that it was a great honor, and I was and consider myself so privileged to have been the choice for this wonderful historic occasion. But oftentimes during my career, I hearken back to the life experiences and that particular concert of Marian Anderson. I remember just after 9/11 here in the United States, I was asked to sing at the Washington National Cathedral for Washington's response for the prayer service of healing for the nation. And I didn't really understand at the time that I was asked the magnitude of what that my performance or my participation in that would later turn out to be. But as I stood there and I looked out into the sea of faces in the National Cathedral, I remember looking and thinking, that looks like President Ford. Is that President Ford? And then I saw next to him, I said, that looks like President Carter. Is that Carter? And then I saw President Bill Clinton and President George Bush, and I had not realized that. I mean, I didn't really know what what my participation would be. And at that moment that I recognized those presidents, I turned my mind to that Easter Sunday of Marian Anderson. I said, Denyce, just think what Marian Anderson must have felt like, when she had to see in that sea of people during that very historic moment. And I turned my attention to her, and in that moment, and I thought, she got through that, so you can get through this. But to have been a part of it was a tremendous honor, because Marian Anderson, I remember learning about Marian Anderson when I was in the 4th grade. I was at W.B. Patterson Elementary School, and I was in Miss Hamer's class. And during that time, it was in the month of February, and it was Black History Week before it became a month. And I remember learning about the life of Marian Anderson when I was in the 4th grade, and just being fascinated by who she was, and having no idea how my life would later take shape and how integral she would become a part of such a huge part of my life experience, certainly my musical experience. And I remember that moment. I remember the day that we learned about her, and I just remember the feeling of pride that I had just as an African-American child, when the whole class studied about Marian Anderson. I just remember just feeling so proud and so excited to learn about this great woman. And little did I know at that time how much of an impact that moment and later the woman herself and that career would have in my life.
That is certainly a blessing. I was actually honored to be at that performance at the Lincoln Memorial. I was there with Mame Holt, the mother of the late Ben Holt, and we actually had a chance to greet you, so that was a high honor. And I remember recall that you wore a gown.
Oh, my goodness.
I recall that you wore a gown that was especially given to you by Miss Anderson. How did that special relationship come about?
Some years ago, in the early 90s, I was the recipient of the Marian Anderson Award. There are quite a few Marian Anderson Awards, but this was the one that's actually given at that time in her home of Danbury, Connecticut. And I had given a recital at the Charles Ives Center, and Miss Anderson was there. But before meeting her there, no, I guess I did meet her there. No, it isn't true. Before meeting her there, I was invited to her home in Danbury, Connecticut, and I came with my mother. And that was an enormous, that was one of these days that will be etched, in my memory and will remain sort of in my foundation, in a bedrock for as long as I, continue to live. I remember going to her home, and and when we arrived, her nurse answered the door, and I was very nervous, so I asked for the ladies' room, and I remember as I was walking out, and by that time, she was quite fragile. I'm not quite sure how old she was, but she was in her 90s at that point, or late 80s. And I remember as I was leaving the bathroom, I could hear the clicking of a walker behind me. And then I heard this voice say, "Are you Denyce Graves?" Which was one of those voices that makes you shake, with the resonance that was in that sound. And in that moment, in that very instant, I said to myself, we were supposed to know of this woman. We were supposed to know of her. Music was just her vehicle. I'm sure that had she not been a singer, we would have known her in another capacity, because she had such command in her presence, even as a frail 90-year-old woman walking with her walker. She had one of these voices that, you'd hear in a room full of people, and everybody would turn to see who was speaking, or there was something in her being that commanded your attention. And I felt that in that moment. In that moment, I remember thinking, what a great woman. And I hadn't even yet turned around to take in her face. I just remember being stunned in my steps as I heard her voice from behind. and just thinking what a mighty woman she was, even though the body was quite contrary to the strength of her being. And so at that time, we had a wonderful time chit-chatting, and she didn't want to discuss at all the career, really. She didn't want to discuss these moments that we're talking about now, the famous Easter Sunday concert. She didn't want to talk about those things. She really wanted to, I guess she had enough interviews, and her life had become defined by those moments, and that isn't where she was at that time. What she really wanted to discuss was how I was feeling about the business and how things were going in my life, and also the work that she was doing with the Salvation Army and working with children. And that's what she was really passionate about at that time. And we spent the day together, and it was fantastic. And as I left, she said that she wanted to offer something to me. And, in fact, she let me into her wardrobe and let me choose which gown it is that I wanted to have, which, was just an amazing, I come from the world of opera where oftentimes in the theater when you're doing a production you can see the names in the costumes of some of the great singers that have gone on before you. Oftentimes if I'm singing something at the Met, I'll see inside, Horn from Marilyn Horne or Verrett, God rest her soul, we just lost the great Shirley Verrett. And I remember looking at her gown, and her name was in the gown. It is a Karenska gown, and it had the name Anderson inside of it. And so I made the choice that you saw, the choice that I sang the concert in. And I've just been so grateful to her. And then she gave me a piece of advice. She said, be careful with your gowns that you don't store them in plastic because that'll ruin them. Leave them out of the plastic. And we had a wonderful time just as women, as girls, as human beings, as artists, sharing that day. And she fell in love with my mother. And I said to her, Ms. Anderson, I'd love to come back to see you. I just wanted to recount something that I'd forgotten. When I arrived at her home in Danbury, Connecticut, at the farm, her nursemaid opened the door, and she said, you just missed Kathy Battle. I guess Kathleen Battle had come down to visit Marian Anderson. And I remembered that some years ago, back in early 2000, 2002, 2003, we'd done a tribute concert to the life of Marian Anderson. It was myself and Jesse Norman and Sylvia McNair, who was also a winner the year before I won the Marian Anderson Award. And I remember Kathy Battle sent a telegram to all of us saying how sorry she was that she couldn't be at the event, and how much she treasured Marian Anderson. So I know that oftentimes we hear different stories about Kathleen Battle, but I was happy am happy to share that story with you. So that's just a little bit that I had forgotten about it. I wanted to include in recounting of my story. And so after we visited that day, I asked her if I could come and see her again, and she said, only if you bring your mother, because she fell in love with my mother and chatting with her mother. And then I met her for the second time at the Charles Ives Center. I was not wearing the gown at that time, for a concert in celebration of my winning the Marian Anderson Award. And then I visited her another time after that. And then shortly after that, she went to go live with her nephew, Maestro James DePriest, out in Portland, Oregon. And then sometime afterwards, she crossed over to the other side.
That is quite a moving experience. This is just so wonderful. Many great singers, such as Marian Anderson, had their humble musical beginnings in the church. And I would like to know if you could possibly discuss the role of the African American church and how it played a role in your development as a singer.
Some years ago, I did a project called Church. You can probably find it online or maybe at Amazon or something like that. It was a project I did called Church. I was in New York having lunch with a friend of mine, Gene Shear, who's a wonderful composer, by the way, a magnificent lyricist and singer and artist, all-around artist. And we were having lunch, and we were speaking about, in general, African-American opera singers. And he was saying, Kathleen Battle got her start in the church, and Leontine Price and Jesse Norman. And I said, well, I'm sure not just opera singers. I'm sure that if you span, all the different genres of African-American men and women, you would find that many of them got their roots, in the church. And so I decided to do this project called Church, where we would take women from all sorts of different disciplines, from Broadway, from R&B, from gospel, from classical music, and all of these women who got their starts in the church on this CD and DVD, talking about their experiences growing up in the church and how the church informed their music making, and about how we all sort of came from the same root but went into different disciplines. But to answer the question more specifically, absolutely, the African-American, and for me, the African-American church was my very first, if I can call it, audience. It was my very first experience singing in front of people. I remember it very well. I'm here next to my brother. My family had and I know you've been working with Andre Graves on this, on our speaking today, and he's my brother. And our family had a singing group called the Inspirational Children of God, and we used to sing gospel music in church on Sunday morning. And my brother was the one who sang all of the solos, in fact, and still, my brother and sister, I'm one of three. My brother and sister both have beautiful voices, and my brother, though, as you may have noticed, has a gorgeous speaking voice and has a beautiful singing voice, too. And I've always said that had he the interest or the ambition, I think he could have made a very important career in music if that was something that he felt led to do. But anyway, he sang all of the solos in our little family group. And there was one Sunday morning that he was sick. I think he was legitimately sick. I don't think he faked it, but who knows. Where, he said, I'm sick, I can't sing. And my mother said, well, Denyce, you have to sing. And I said, I cannot possibly do that. And I was probably, out of my brother and sister, the one who was the most socially uncomfortable, which is interesting how I've sort of played out my life as I healed that part of myself. But I was the one who was always, clutching behind my mother's skirt, and the one who was very, very much isolated and on my own all the time. And you know how it is in the church. If you're called in front of the church, nobody wants to hear anything about it. Neither is that tolerated or accepted for 5 seconds, that you can't sing, or you don't feel what, you're standing up there in front of everybody and you have no choice, So there was no choice, and I had to sing, and my poor mother had no idea what in the world she was creating in that moment. But it became my very first audience, and was an opening of a new avenue for me. And I would say certainly everything that I feel musically and that I understand in my emotional body has its roots in the church, without a doubt, in terms of musicality, my understanding of the music, my being able to communicate and connect with the words and to be able to tell a story. Absolutely, that directly came from the church. It informed me more than anything else did musically, and became the foundation from which I would continue to draw from to this day. So it made a big difference in my being able to do what it is that I do today. And I have said many times, and I did in the church project, that I find it no surprise that the African-American woman find herself on the operatic stage or on a Broadway theater or in a recording studio or any of those wonderful places where they give you sort of a mouthpiece to be able to express yourself musically, because it was an absolute natural progression from the church.
That is truly a wonderful example. I've had the privilege to talk to so many singers, and to hear you affirm the place of the church and the role of training great singers is truly humbling.
When I was a student at Oberlin College doing my undergraduate work, I gave a recital once at Oberlin College. I was trying to raise money to go study in Austria for the summer with my voice teacher. And I was doing these concerts on my own, and there was this older black man who came to the recital, and he came up to me and he said, "Young woman, I noticed that you didn't program any spirituals or gospel music on your recital." And I said, "No, sir, I didn't. This is the material that I'm learning, and I'm being taught in the conservatory and blah, blah, blah." Anyway, he said to me, "If we don't sing this music, who will?" And I don't know who he was, but I have thought of him ever since that day. And whenever I'm doing a concert or whatever it is that I involve myself in, particularly with recital, as I do lots of recitals, I always program, spirituals in or art songs by African-American composers, and I think of that man every time. And so, yes, I am where I am today because, and even though, we hated my mother at the time for making us go to church all the time, and because we were truly, we were in church 7 days a week and all day on Sunday, and we wanted to, be out with our friends and do other things. Even though at the time we never wanted to do that. We wanted to be, somewhere else and, not being in the church, hanging out with our friends. It was one of the many great gifts that she gave to me. And it gives me and has given me the life that I have today.
That is wonderful. It's truly a blessing. Now, I want to kind of go back to something we sort of touched on because you mentioned a couple of names like Kathleen Battle and Leontine Price. I just would like to know, perhaps for the listeners, if you could share some of the great voices that perhaps have served as inspirations for you on your journey in becoming an opera singer.
Well, that's Leontine Price, without a doubt. I mean, it's Leontine Price. I was a student at Performing Arts High School here in Washington, D.C., the Duke Ellington School, and I remember this very, very clearly. I was late for class one day, and I ran into a girlfriend in the hallway, and she said, "Denyce, I just heard something in the listening library. You got to come." And I said, "I can't, Cassandra, I cannot listen to that right now. I'm late for class." She said, No, you have to listen to this." So we went into the library, and she'd found a recording of Leontine Price singing Puccini arias. We went into that listening room, and we cut all of our classes for the rest of that day. We didn't go to the bathroom. We didn't eat. We didn't do any. We stayed in that listening library and prayed and listened to Price sing over, and after it was finished, play it again. After we said, play it again, over and over until the janitor came and knocked on the door when they were closing the school and said, "You girls have got to leave." And at that moment, I felt like I'd found my purpose. I felt like this is exactly what I was born to do. Now, I didn't know if I'd be able to do it, but it felt so true at the bottom of my soul. Like that was what I was supposed to be doing. And, maybe I can try to find this. And since that time, I have expressed many times to Miss Price what an influence she has had on me. And she called me at Christmas time, this past Christmas, and left me a beautiful message. I wonder if she would be angry if I played the message. I've got it on my cell phone. Anyway, I don't know. She's a pretty private woman. Anyway, she called me at Christmas and just to extend her thoughts and best wishes for the new year. And she is certainly at the top of my list. I mean, she is the figure and the artist and the voice that drew me in this direction. Without a doubt, because I always say, she sings and you see the face of God, because I've never heard anything sung with such exquisite beauty. I didn't know what opera was, or classical music was not what was being played in the household that I grew up in. I knew nothing about that. I was completely foreign to that, and yet I heard it, and it immediately spoke to me. It immediately touched me. It immediately moved me. It immediately shook me, and all of those happenings together, stunned me enough to say, this is what I feel like I'd like to do in my life. And then after that, of course, after that appetite was whet, I began to discover, of course, many other great African-American singers and many other type of wonderful opera singers all across the globe. So I'm so grateful to her and for all that she, has gone through in her life, because she went through quite a lot, as did Marian Anderson, who really, trailblazed the path. But Leontine Price quite differently, because Marian Anderson was not allowed to be an opera singer. It wasn't until actually the twilight of her career that she was, the first African-American to sing at the Metropolitan Opera. But Leontine Price was the Metropolitan Opera's reigning, diva, and who's all kinds of unbelievable scrutiny and criticism and harassment, and still she sang with such beauty, with such luminosity, with such understanding. There was such an emotional connection. One of those singers that you don't have to understand what it is she's singing about, at all, because it reaches you, because what she is communicating goes past language. And so it was certainly Leontine Price. And then I'm an enormous Kathy Battle fan, because I just think that she sings with such beauty and such delicateness. I've always been a fan of her musicianship, and remain so to this day. And also a lot of wonderful singers that you may or may not know of. I'm still learning. I'm still studying. I still get frustrated. I'm still trying to figure this thing out. And, I'm still growing, and I'm still surprised all the time by my instrument and what it can do, and how it also has a mind of its own. And it does indeed. And a lot of the times it's just about me, I guess, getting out of the way and allowing my voice to sing itself.
Leontine Price is perhaps one of the last living opera legends that we have, and I would just love to see her really, truly honored in some grand fashion, by all of the opera singers in the setting, because she truly is a magnificent person, and everything that you spoke to is so true.
Yeah, it's true. 2 years ago, she was one of the first recipients of the National Endowment of the Arts here in Washington, D.C. awards. But there aren't enough, awards or accolades that we can give this very, very great woman, because she's really sort of the godmother as far as opera is concerned, in my mind, who has just made us all so proud and made us want to aspire to be like, a great, great artist. I mean, truly a mighty artist, not in a class all her own. Hello?
Hello, Ms. Graves?
I'm still here.
Okay, so that we lost the connection there. Just moving forward, in terms of repertoire, what new music or what are you working on currently in terms of literature or things that you hope to pursue?
Oh, so many things. There's a film which has been tossed around for a little bit now about me portraying the life of Marian Anderson. So we have got, just keep your fingers crossed and keep, lifting up the prayers for that. And so we certainly hope that comes to fruition for sure. I've got this calendar year bunches of concerts. I mean, we start now on February 1st with this, not really a reenactment, but a celebration that the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. is doing to the life of President John F. Kennedy. And Graves-Montgomery did a concert at the White House back in '62, and they're having me do a concert. They're doing 13 days at the Kennedy Center in celebration of President John F. Kennedy. And I'm doing a concert on February 1st in this honor of President Kennedy, singing the concert that Graves-Montgomery sang so many years ago for the first half, and then the second half it will be more Denyce Graves. And then a concert with James Madison University, and then Baton Rouge Symphony, and lots of concerts throughout, mostly concerts and recitals throughout the calendar year until the fall, when I sing again the role of Azucena and Trovatore in North Carolina, and then ending up in Europe for the end of the year. But in addition to this calendar year, there are lots of projects that, you know, I'm personally working on. I'm still slowly writing my memories. There was a book completed about my life, but actually since the writing of that book, so much more has happened in my life, has become far more interesting than it just keeps unfolding, and every time there's a new occurrence, the author, that author of that book writes me and says, I think we're going to have to start all over again, Denyce, you know. So still quietly working on that project, working on a recording project that I'm hoping to finish at some time this year with in the Zagreb Philharmonic. And voila, and being a wife and a mother, and trying to keep myself as centered and my feet on the ground and my heart open to receive the abundance, and asking daily to be an instrument of the love of God. And so that's where I am. I've got a whole lot of stuff going on, have a lot of balls in the air, but happy to be working, happy to be performing, particularly in these tough economic times. And
wow.
Happy to be there and doing the thing that turns me on like nothing else.
That is wonderful. Now, will Graves-Montgomery actually be in attendance at that particular recital?
Oh, I don't know. She's aware of it because last year she was a recipient of the Kennedy Center Honors, and I went to was a part. Actually, I'm on the committee, and so I was a part of the entire weekend and spent some time with Graves-Montgomery, and we spoke about that, and I asked her specifically which pieces were her favorite and what she thought about it and how difficult it was and why she made the choices that she made. And she is aware of the concert, but she lives in Europe, and so I don't know that she'll be in attendance, but I'm happy you said that, because maybe I'll just reach out and extend that invitation.
Well, I really hope so, because she truly deserves to be there, and have a person of your musical stature to pay tribute to her is such a magnificent honor. Another honor that I personally had was to be in the audience when you sang in the birthday tribute for the late Senator Edward Kennedy. And I wanted to ask you, what was it like being on the stage beside President Barack Obama as he led the singing of Happy Birthday?
Wasn't that wonderful? Wasn't that wonderful? So great. I said to him, don't choose a high key, start it low. Well, I was thrilled. I've been an enormous supporter of President Barack Obama since I heard about him back in 2000, before he spoke at the Democratic National Convention. I'd heard him speak in Chicago, and I called my best girlfriend who lives in Zurich, and I called her and I said, I just heard this man speak. I said, he has a name which was kind of unusual. I said, but hearing him speak must have been what it was like to have heard Martin Luther King. And I said to her, and these were my words verbatim, I said, he could be like the president or something. And years later, when he spoke at the DNC, I called her and I said, I just heard this man that I was telling you about, that I heard, who I found so dynamic and just so intelligent and so wise and, just so spot on. And there we have him now. So I have been a huge supporter from the very, very beginning. I'm so proud of him. Every time I see him and his family, and every time I see them, I'm just so proud, and just bursting, my heart just explodes in appreciation and gratitude for who he is, all that he is, and what he brings to the entire world. And it's such a wonderful feeling as an African-American person to have these great leaders out there, because so often, as you know, in so much of our childhood, we had so many different images splattered in front of us, all the time, that were, negative. And it's so gratifying. I just can sigh and really exhale and say, throw my hands up towards the heavens and say, thank you for sending us this magnificent servant who uses his life so beautifully and on such an enormous arena for the entire world to marvel at. And, he walked into a very, very complicated situation that is certainly not easy. And I'm sure that, those who seek the office, first of all, God bless them, because who would seek it? Because it's just such an enormous responsibility. But I'm sure that once you actually walk into the office and have a few days on the job, it's very, very, very different from what anyone could have imagined. And so I continually, pray for him and for his family, and for all that he has to face, and that he is surrounded with people who support and care for him and allow him to be who he is and to use his intellect in the way that got him to be, the President of the United States. So I'm saying all of that to say I was thrilled, tickled to bits to be next to him. So excited. In fact, they said to me, the Secret Service came and they gave us, the right protocol, and they said, no, please don't touch the president. When he came, I jumped on him. I threw my arms around him. I said, I love you so much. I'm just so proud of you. And, he received that, and I am. So for me, that moment is singing for the late Senator Ted Kennedy's birthday celebration at the Kennedy Center, in addition to the great honor of that and having my mom and my daughter next to me, my two bookends, my pillars, and my husband as well, be there to witness that event was tremendous. Tremendous. In fact, I've got a photograph of it on my piano, so I loved it.
That is beautiful, beautiful. Jeff, in closing, I want to say thank you so much for joining me on this broadcast. You have been such a voice of enlightenment for all of us who strive to be at the level of excellence that you are in music. So I send that from the bottom of my heart as a musician, one to another. And just in closing, I would like to know if you could offer a piece of advice to all of the young aspiring singers out here who are on a plight to becoming, an opera singer but get discouraged.
Yeah, it's certainly the process of, that path of becoming is one of a great test, and those trials don't stop. I remember when I met with Leontine Price in her home once some years back. She said, Miss Gray, she has a southern accent. She says, come on in, Miss Denyce. And she said, you see all these plaques and all these awards that I have on my wall? I call this my trials and tribulations room. And I just had such great appreciation for that because, it's a challenging road. However, I can think of nothing more beautiful than to live your life making music and bringing beauty into the lives and into the world that so desperately needs it. So what I would say to young people, and I'm often asked this question, is to first of all find a really good voice builder, someone that they trust, and to surround themselves with as much music as possible, and all kinds of music, not just classical music, I would say, all kinds of music, and use that time to train your ears, train your mind, to condition your heart, see what feels like you, to keep yourself and to keep your foothold and your foundation in music, because it's important to be reminded as you are on this path of why we're doing this in the first place. Because it's an honor to be able to do it. It really is, because how many people have you met that say, oh, gosh, if I could sing, I would love to be able to sing. I hear that all the time. So to be able to have the gift to do it, in addition to that, to have the seed planted in your soul that has the desire in it to make the music is so important. So know that it's a privilege to be able to do that and sing for whomever will listen. I say so often that I would do this were people listening or not, and it's true. I would do it for my own pleasure. Yesterday, I had a wonderful rehearsal, and I was just so happy and so elated after that rehearsal, and I was coming home, and I called my husband, and I said, I'm so happy. I just had the most wonderful rehearsal, and there's nothing in the world for me that can compare to that. So I would say to hold on to the joy, the reason why it is that you're singing. And that's why I say surround yourself in music, because there are many things that one has to do. You have to continue to study. For singers, I would say learn and study the piano. It's going to help you so much throughout the whole of your career, or some other instrument. Learn to make music differently than just through the voice, because the voice has its limitations. You can't sing all day long. You really can't, as much as you might like to. So learn to make music differently. Go to concerts. Listen to CDs, and listen to everybody, and try. I know that for a lot of young singers, we're taught to be so judgmental, so critical, and to examine every single note that we sing, but to try to listen with just an open mind and an open heart, and just see what you feel. Watch yourself. Watch your emotions. See what they tell you about who you are. Learn to develop a relationship with your own inner voice, because so many times you're going to have to rely on that. There are going to be people and lots of personalities in your life that say, oh, no, I think you should do this and I think you should do that. And while all of that can be valid, I would say listen to your own inner voice. And that relationship that you can develop starts now, starts today, starts this second. Be quiet enough to listen to your own guidance and trust and know that it's there, because it is your divine birthright, and it's there for everyone. So keep the love for music. Surround yourself in music. Continue to study. Study a different instrument also along with the voice. Go to concerts. And keep working hard. Keep working hard. There was a wonderful phrase that Marian Anderson said once about singers. I wonder if I could find that. There was a beautiful quote. She says, we believe that everyone has a gift for something, even if it is the gift of being a good friend. Young people should try and set a goal for themselves and see that everything they do has some relation to the ultimate attainment of that goal. The degree with which they lend themselves to it shows the metal of which they are made. So know that the path will not be an easy one, but were it easy, everybody would be doing it, right? Hang in there, stay in there, and keep a hold of your love and your joy for singing. This is the most important thing. Also, I'd just like to tell everybody to visit www.denycegraves.com, and they can find out my fall schedule, what's in front of us for this year. There's new video footage coming soon. They can sign up for the newsletter and send me a note and let me know what's on their mind. And I do appreciate those things, and I do answer them myself. And so, voila, that's what I'd like to say.
Thank you so much, Ms. Graves. Again, we have spoken live with Ms. Denyce Graves, internationally acclaimed mezzo-soprano